Either we heal as a team, or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Yes, they are. Ideas are bulletproof, and that's why they're trying to make everything illegal. Welcome to the Friday episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. It is June the 3rd, 2011. Yes, the website is still down. I apologize. The server was attacked by the IDF, is what I'm told. And this is not the first time they've attacked the website and attacked our server. So the IDF is the Israeli Defense Force, just in case anybody's wondering. And no, this is not the first time it's happened. And my hackers have told me that they were able to backtrace it. So interesting. And they actually spent a lot of time doing it. And these guys are professionals. They know what they're doing. They are consulted by many other people other than me. They're my friends, but they do consulting work for other people too. So these guys are the real deal, and they were able to backtrace the IP and everything for me. Anyway, so we're trying to repair the server, and I have one guy working on it right now. He refuses to allow anybody else access. He wants to make sure that everything is, under lock and key before anything else gets taken out, before we go back up. So I've asked him to spend the extra time, securing everything and making sure that it can't happen again. So it might take an extra day to bring the site up, but I'd rather have it more secure than throwing it back up and getting it knocked back offline within a few hours. So I apologize for the inconvenience. It will be back up. Without wasting any more time, I want to get into today's topic because, again, during the week I've only got an hour to talk to you guys. On Sundays, I'm here from 5 to 7, but today I'm only here for an hour. So I want to get into the meat and potatoes of tonight's topic, which is Lyme disease. And tonight, I'm joined by two researchers, actually three researchers. Bob Tuscan will be coming on in a little while. The amazing, incredible Bob Tuscan, you all know who he is. He's an Oracle Broadcasting talk radio show host, and we syndicate his show here. But I'm also joined by Steve Stars, who you guys know. He's been on my program multiple times. He's been on Bob's show. He used to actually co-host with Bob. Steve's a filmmaker, an incredible researcher. And I'm also joined today by Jason Erbe. Jason, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. If I'm not, go ahead and feel free to tell me if I'm not. But I'm joined by these two gentlemen who have extensively researched the subject of Lyme disease and where it came from and what it actually is. And I've researched it myself, and I know it goes back to Plum Island, which is run by the Department of Homeland Security. It was started by a Nazi scientist named Erich Traub, whose specialty was bioweapons and injecting these bioweapons into ticks. So without blabbering on for the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'll let my guests share their knowledge, and they'll enlighten you because...
Oops. Oh, Popeye, I hope we're coming through okay. I don't know if I lost you or... Let's see.
Yeah, he dropped... Steve?
Yeah.
Popeye dropped off for a second.
Okay, good. Well, hey, Bob, how you doing? I think Jason's joining with us, too. I should probably just say one thing, and that is that I'm not an expert on Lyme disease. I'm just learning about it right now because I'm being forced to look at it due to the fact that I feel like people around me may be affected by this. Jason and I, of course, you follow this with too, Bob. We've been looking at HIV for a long period of time, and HIV/AIDS, and we've really gotten to the bottom of that. This is the plague that didn't exist. It seems to me like Lyme disease may be the plague that's being ignored that does exist. It's much bigger than HIV/AIDS. It's probably 10 times the size. It's growing. It's supposed to be the fastest growing infectious disease in the U.S. right now. It is said to be caused by deer ticks. I live out here in Colorado, and we don't have a whole lot of Lyme disease compared to some other places, which I guess would have more deer ticks, but we've got a lot of ticks out here, and our numbers are not coming up that big. So I'm wondering, to be honest with you, if this isn't the only means and mode by which it's transmitted, and what could be happening. It's possible, I think, Popeye, that there may be other means and modes of transmission. We'll talk a little bit about that if we get on to the show and everything like that, but I don't want to dominate the whole amount of time. I can just say this, that I'm looking at some of the tests for Lyme disease, and Jason, Bob, Popeye, we have the same problems that we've had before with HIV/AIDS. They have an ELISA test, a Western blot, a PCR, all kinds of things happening here. And so anyhow, I'm not quite sure if I'm coming through clearly right now. I'll back off.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, Steve. Everything's perfect. I had a little technical problem with my Skype, but I'm all good to go. Go ahead.
Okay. Was that it? Well, hopefully that's a pretty good introduction. But they do have a number of tests, and I've been looking at some things. One of the problems that we're having with this, Popeye, is that people can be infected with this spirochete, which is they're very similar to a syphilis bacteria, where it has kind of a corkscrew mechanism where the flagella basically can burrow through tissues and things like that. It's very similar and may in fact be something that was integrated into a syphilis germ. We've seen that. It's called Borrelia burgdorferi, and it's been around for a while, but the reality is, if it has been spliced, if it has been manipulated by Erich Traub on Plum Island, and oddly enough, this is where the Lyme disease gets its name from, Lyme, Connecticut, which is just off the coast, 10 miles from Plum Island, and this is where this huge outbreak was. There may, in fact, be some reasons why this thing is all of a sudden appearing right now. Again, I don't want to put us on a witch hunt, with these deals, because we had this happen with HIV/AIDS. Where was it created? Was it created in a laboratory by some mad scientist, or was it created in a boardroom by somebody who wanted to fund a new viral cancer research, program that had gone dead before? Well, it was the latter in this case. But anyhow, I'll just back off a little bit, let you guys ask some questions. The key thing about all of this, though, is it is spreading, and it can go for many years misdiagnosed, and it can result in very serious illnesses and even death, things like ALS, Alzheimer's disease, MS, a number of other problems that can relate to what it might be.
Hold that thought, Steve. We're going into break. It's amazing to ponder the thought that actually doesn't really amaze me. I'm not surprised, but I'm sure it surprises most of our listeners to find out the government, is using bioweapons on its own people for testing. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss the rest of this interview. You probably won't be able to sleep at night either tonight, but that's okay.
9/11 was an inside job. They lie, they scam, they cheat and steal. They plot, they fund, they act, it's real. They watch, they hunt, they punish and kill. Hell, we ain't gonna take it. Oh, we're not gonna take it anymore.
Welcome back. Today's Friday. This is Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. Today I'm joined by Steve Stars. Steve, say hello.
Hey, hello. Glad to be back with you, Popeye.
Jason, say hello. Jason Erbe.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
These two are very, 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 very intelligent men, and I have had numerous off-air conversations with them about tonight's topic, and I can tell you guys, the other night, I couldn't sleep after talking to you, Steve, about this. So, I mean, it was just creepy to know. I have people, friends that I'm close to that have Lyme disease, and I see how debilitating it is for them. One of them has to get a shot once a month, or else he can't walk. His joints and everything swell up. So I see what it does to people, and it's just insane. I mean, honestly, all bloviating aside, the stuff that you told me and the stuff that I discussed with the both of you, it really freaked me out and shocked me. I mean, I already knew about Eric Traub and stuff, but just to get deeper into it, the stuff that you were telling me, it was really creepy, Steve. It was really creepy about just knowing that it's on their list. They openly admit that the DOD has a patent on a form of Lyme disease. That's how effed up is that?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, it's like we know what they did with the anthrax stuff. And, I'll let Jason comment a little bit on some things that I noticed here. Jason, look, they have a ELISA, Western blot, even a PCR test. They're testing for antigens, of course, and all kinds of things. But the big problem with this is that when they initially, diagnose somebody with Lyme disease, they can't really detect the antibody for the bacterium after about 6 weeks. It says the second antibody we make right after the IgM is the IgG antibody. This antibody takes 4 to 8 weeks to form and is gone in less than 12 months. It peaks at about 6 weeks. This antibody crosses the placenta, so an infected mother can pass this antibody onto her child. An IgG antibody titer in a newborn does not mean they have an active infection, but it also says because of the difference of these two antibodies, two separate tests are available for their test to determine whether you have this. This is just an antibody test. Same thing that we saw with Jason, same thing what we saw with HIV with the ELISA test. Same kinds of figures and numbers due to, we call them false positives, but their selectivity and specificity is actually the technical terms that they're used here. But what we're looking at is the problem is that they cannot detect these things after a short period of time. So we're talking about if the virus it attacks viruses, bacteria, yeast, toxins, and transplants, the Ig antibody can kill bacteria indirectly by tagging or marking the foreign invaders, but this only lasts for a very short period of time. And so
wait, Steve, you're saying that you can only find this, like they can only test for this, or they have a small window of opportunity to find it, and that's it?
Yeah, That's it, basically. There are two different kinds of tests. Now, you can use other means and procedures, of course, but with these antibody tests, you're very limited. It says in about 6 weeks with one of them, and I think you have maybe several months with the other. Let me see. I can actually find the direct times based on the ICE. It's called the IgM and the IgG antibody test. They're ELISA tests, Jason, that are used to detect this thing, but because they're not interactive after a period of time, you can have Lyme disease, an infection from Lyme disease maybe 2 years ago, and it's very likely that you'll not catch it with these antibody tests.
Hey, Steve, do you have any information then on how long that the symptoms can be chronic in some people? Like, what percentage of people have the chronic symptoms versus the acute symptoms?
Well, that's, I think Popeye knows about this because he had some personal encounters with this himself. But, they say that people have come down with these symptoms sometimes 5, 10, 15 years later, or have had them ongoing and progressive, or they've been off and on intermittent. And so that's part of the problem. And then when they go back and talk about this sickness, they're misdiagnosed 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. People have spent hundreds of $1,000s.
Yeah, they didn't know. My one friend, it took them forever to figure out what it was, and then once they figured it out, he had to go. I forget exactly what it is. I know there's a steroid involved inside the shot, but there's something, because they could mix all that up into one syringe and inject you with it. So I don't know what else I'm sure there was probably a patented drug that you just had to, the drug company just mysteriously made, Yeah. And I laugh just because if I don't laugh, it makes you want to cry to know that all these people that are sick and dying, this is being done on purpose. Right. So anybody that thinks Steve or Jason is crazy, go do the research. I mean, I understood about Plum Island and the crazy whacked out things that are going on there a couple of years ago. But when I had heard the theory of Lyme disease and where it had come from, but I never really looked into it. And then planning for the show and talking to you, Steve, I was like, oh my God. And then I went and researched the things that you told me, and you were 110% dead on accurate. So
yeah, it's probably much bigger than we think. There's a great film out called Under Our Skin. If you haven't seen that, you can watch it actually on the internet, or you can get it, rent it from Netflix or people like that. It's available even, via the internet delivery. It's a good film. And, of course, Jason and I will tell you, Popeye, that we've seen scare tactics and things that have been thrust upon the American public. HIV/AIDS was a classic example of something that wasn't a disease, that was created in the mindset of people, just like, the H1N1 flu scare, very similar. But this is one of those deals like drug-resistant tuberculosis or other things that we know that are out there that they're not talking about or not dealing with and not exploring. And so the real problem with this isn't what we do know. It's that why in hell don't we know what's going on? That's the real problem with the whole thing. And why aren't we looking at this much more closely? To quote
Donald Rumsfeld, he called those unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
Remember, he had his known unknowns and then quote unquote unknown unknowns. Well, yeah, I'm quoting Donald Rumsfeld. It's the unknown unknowns that you have to worry about.
Yes, Rumsfeld disease too. He is an expert with killing people.
Oh, Mr. Aspartame himself. Don't even get me started on him. People, listeners, go look up a company called Searle. Searle. It is now owned by Monsanto. Go look up who the president of the company was at the time that they released aspartame to the general public, even though their scientists knew it caused cancer in lab rats. Yep. Good old Donnie Rumsfeld. But hey, he's an okay guy. I had someone very close to me, Steve, actually argue with me about this because I explained to them and they realized that aspartame was bad and everything, but at the same token they turned around and said, but Rumsfeld, he's a hands-on kind of guy. He's a no-nonsense guy. Look how he handled things after 9/11. And I'm like, do you hear yourself? Do you hear yourself talking in circles? Do you hear your circular logic, your doublespeak that's coming out of your mouth? You know this guy is evil and willing to poison people and as a mass murderer, and here you are still praising him because you're trying to justify that there's some good in him. Why do that? You're projecting what you wish on these people, and that's one of the biggest problems. People don't want to believe researchers like you guys or myself. They want to say, oh, he's a crazy radio host. He's a whack job, and these guys are conspiracy theorist nutbags that he hangs out with. No, that's not how it is. We're thinking outside the box. We're not afraid to think and say, hey, look, this could happen. That this is a reality. When you get attacked for stuff, especially when they're attacking you for things that if you go and check it on record yourself, you can easily see all this is there in their own documents. So it's when you're getting attacked, you got to be. I know it's an old cliche, but you get the most flack when you're over target. So
That's right.
all right, Steve, Jason, hang in there. Listeners, we'll be right back. We're going to go pay the bills. We'll be back in about 3.5 minutes. Stay tuned, because when we come back, we're going to get a little more in depth into Lyme disease and what these two guys have to say about it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Today is Friday, June 3rd, 2011. I'm your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com, and this is Down the Rabbit Hole. Today I'm talking about Lyme disease with Steve Stars and Jason Erbe. So, Steve, during the break, I was asking you guys about the whole testing process and the testing for Lyme disease and everything, and you guys were actually enlightened me to something again that I had overlooked, was the fact that you guys were pretty much surmising that the testing process is BS and that it's kind of similar to the testing process for HIV. Could you go into detail for the listeners?
Well, in theory, what you're supposed to be able to test for is an antibody created by your body. Your body will create an antibody, and they use what they call an ELISA test, which is an enzyme-linked assay, is what it really is. That it detects these enzymes and the antibodies. The problem that they have here with this is that the first test, as we mentioned before, the IgM, is it takes about 4 weeks for your antibody level to come up to detect the Lyme, that you're infected with the Lyme disease, this what they call the Borrelia burgdorferi, bacteria, and this it's called a spirochete. It's like a corkscrew type in bacteria. And the nice thing about the Lyme, as opposed to HIV, is we can actually see it, Jason. It'll show up. You can see it. It's like looking at the difference between the Titanic and a motorboat in a microscope. It's much easier to see this bacteria. We actually can detect it. The problem is, though, the first test for antibodies peaks within about 4 weeks, and within 6 months, that first test will not detect the bacteria again. The second one takes a little longer to develop. It's called the IgM ELISA test, and it's gone and no longer effective within about a year. So people who are infected with Lyme disease, if they don't notice it right away, if they don't catch it right away, can possibly take these tests within 6 months to a year after being infected, and the antibody tests will no longer work. So in this case, what you have is a situation that's almost opposite of HIV, where they can test you for HIV antibodies, 30 years after you've supposedly been infected, and there they are. In this case, they can't detect the antibody anymore. So then they go on to a Western blot, a PCR, and a number of other different things. And this is one of the reasons why we're having so much difficulty, I believe, Popeye and Jason, is that so many people have had an exposure to this, whether it was a deer tick or however else they may have been infected with this specific bacterium, and are developing all kinds of things. We think that maybe as much as 60 to 70% of Alzheimer's disease may be directly related to Lyme. It also may be showing up in ALS, MS, a number of other different things, because this spirochete, it can actually apparently ingrain itself within human DNA. Now, this may be the thing where we link to the Eric Traub and some of the tests done with gene splicing that could have happened at Plum Island. This is why we're looking at a very serious potential, something that can be undetected and can attack all different kinds of organs over a long period of time.
Yeah, this is the kind of organism he was infecting ticks with, and, letting it loose to go do its thing as experiments. It's almost like a sci-fi movie. I mean, it literally takes your breath away when you think about this stuff. And for people, again, for the listeners, you guys got to understand, it's unless you know someone that's affected by it, it's almost undescribable. I mean, you could say, oh, they have joint pain and stuff like this, but the things that I see one of my friends go through is, I said, if by the end of the month, if he's a day late or whatever to go get his shot, he's in big trouble, And I mean, he has to have medical coverage now for the rest of his life. So that's a thing looming over his head. Wherever he works, he always has to make sure he has a decent medical plan that covers that, because those shots are expensive.
And they're cutting back on the insurance on this and saying it's in his mind. It's all psychosomatic. These people.
Oh yeah. That's one of the things that you go through when you're getting, when Lyme was first coming out. A lot of people that now they admit have it was, it's all in your head. It's fake. It's not real. Blah 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 blah. But just like Gulf War syndrome, same thing. Yeah. They said the same exact thing. Oh, it's fake. One of my friends, she was a female Army reservist. She came back from Kuwait, and she had said that they had a couple scares, as they put it, chemical scares or whatever. And long story short, within like 8 months of her coming back, her reproductive system was pretty much destroyed. She could never have kids.
Oh boy, yeah. And of course, they will tell you that was probably exposure to toxins of some sort that were environmental. But they had so many different vaccines that they put our people through.
Even if it was environmental, like the burn pits, the people that have gotten cancer, these young Iraqi vets that are getting cancer from being downwind of these burn pits or working at the burn pits. Even that, you're still at the bare minimum. You're criminally negligent for exposing these people to that. And as military officers, their higher ups, knowing the dangers, are not only criminally negligent, but they could be found guilty of breaking so many articles of the UCMJ. If I actually sat down, I could list probably 5 or 6 things within 10 minutes of. I mean, they would get nailed, and believe it or not, people, when you do something wrong in the military and your leadership wants to nail you to the cross, they find every reason to nail you to the cross. So for these guys to not get nailed to the cross, and in turn, they end up getting promoted, just like the guys that were in charge on 9/11. Nobody got in trouble. Everybody got promotions.
Yeah.
That should stick out.
Something very wrong there. Very
right?
Wrong. I think so, Jason. You do you see the similarities to what's gone wrong here? I mean, we're talking about the medical industrial complex being very, very misguided here. I mean, this is, and that's the question is, how can they be so stupid? Just like you said, Popeye, how can this be going on? I mean, why are we promoting people like Robert Gallo?
Let me ask you guys this: you guys were telling me about HIV.
Right.
Why don't you go ahead, break what you told me to the listeners. Break the news to them that you broke to me.
Yeah. Well, we had said so many times that we explained that this thing was not created in a laboratory. It was created in a board meeting. This was thrust upon the American public as an imaginary disease, and as a result, we were exposing people to all kinds of very dangerous toxic drugs that we were feeding them, like AZT, which is designed to destroy DNA. Now, Jason works with the Rethinking AIDS group pretty closely. Of course, that's where I got my start, working with Charles Thomas, Peter Duesberg, Dave Rasnick, and many of the others. But, maybe he can tell you a little bit about where that's going right now. We do have on record Robert Gallo's own handwritten notes that showed that this man, was obviously seriously impaired, if you like. That's a light way of putting it, because it was stealing the virus from Luc Montagnier and all this other stuff that happened. And we've actually requested that there be a correction in the scientific papers, which they won't even make under under the exposure of this obvious fraud. Jason, what's going on with that whole thing with Gallo and all that?
Yeah, as for the scientific paper, the journal Science, they completely ignored that letter. And there had been follow-ups with that, and a journalist went and called them. And what it is for the listeners who haven't heard about it, that in 1984, there were 4 papers that were published, and the main one, where it said that they had identified the probable cause of AIDS, but actually the lead researcher who had written up the research had said that they hadn't identified the probable cause despite intensive research efforts. But then Robert Gallo, the guy who was credited with co-discovering HIV, that he went and changed it in the weeks before it got published, saying that they had found the cause. And then they had a press conference saying that they had found the probable cause. And then the next year, all the other funding for any alternative explanations for AIDS was completely cut off. So as Steve was saying, that the whole cover story is that there's some circumstantial evidence that may point to what would seem like HIV being created in a lab, but as Steve said, it was actually created in a boardroom, that they went and changed the definition. AIDS is just a collection of pre-existing diseases that prior to them saying that HIV caused it, they used to treat them with other.
Hang on to that thought, Jason. We'll pick up right where we left off when we come back on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. You're listening to Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. We'll be right back after we go pay some bills.
The reasons for the cover-up, the reasons for the censorship. Now I realize that Uncle Sam was not befriending me. He was only using me to be friends with the enemy. A presidential terrorist, ain't that a contradiction? I guess it goes to show the truth is stranger than fiction. But they don't even show the truth when soldiers are missing. I'm on probation. I run out of patience, sick of seeing troops sink to die for your lives. Spending dollars in debt, we holler in protest till we have your arrest.
Welcome back to the final segment. Today is Friday, June 3rd, 2011. My name is Popeye. I'm your host. This is Down the Rabbit Hole. And I'm joined by my good friend Steve Stars, Jason Erbe, and Bob Tuscan is hanging out in the background. Bob can feel free to say hello, or he can hang out in the background. I know he's kind of got a weird connection on his phone. So
BobTuscan.com.
There you go, Bob. Hey, Bob, I heard that you made What Really Happened, and your site, got slammed today because of an article that you had. So congratulations.
Something like that.
Yeah,
well, listen, with your site being down, there's just a huge influx of traffic coming to my site. I mean, there's people out there that are having withdrawals from FederalJack.com. It's crazy, I tell you.
Oh, that actually, is the truth, because I've gotten, literally in the past 5 days, I've gotten over 300 emails. My Facebook keeps getting private. I don't even bother looking at the messages anymore, because I just, I highlight it, and it gives you a little pop-up window, and it just says everything is, how come the site's down? I can't get to the site. Server error, blah. And I'm like, I know. Well,
listen, Popeye, I'm glad that you're incorporating Steve and Jason and all the great topics that we've discussed throughout the years. Steve, Jason, and I have been working now for a couple years together. And this AIDS topic really is the story of my lifetime. Unlike 9/11, which had its effect instantaneously, and then was the pretext to all sorts of other infringements of our rights, this AIDS thing is a constant propaganda war. It's a constant distraction, and unlike the 9/11 event, it's to this day continues to kill people. Well, I guess not unlike 9/11, because there's people still dying from.
No, those drugs kill people, dude. My wife and I were body piercers, and I ran a tattoo shop for a couple years. And I got to tell you, my wife accidentally pierced her finger with a needle after she had pierced somebody with it when she was cleaning up. Now, luckily, the needle had passed through. We only used them once. The needle had passed through a bunch of sterilized wipes and liquid before it hit her. But we still took her to the hospital anyway, and I wanted to ask them what their professional opinion would be to do. And this is years ago. And this is, as I was starting to kind of wake up, but I didn't really know anything about, a lot about health issues or AIDS or anything. And they gave her the AIDS cocktail. And they wanted her to take it for a week, and she took it 2 days, and that was it, because it almost killed her. She said to me, she was like, I'd rather get AIDS, take the risk of getting AIDS than take this stuff. And she got tested. She doesn't have any problems. She never got sick from it. Luckily, we have people fill out forms, and on the form, the woman didn't say that she was sick, but you have to go by their word. And when it comes to that, you at least want to get tested. But long story short, she's okay, but the drugs did more harm than, she, to the point where she said, I don't even want to deal with it. I'd rather take the chance, because literally it was making her throw up. She couldn't keep any food down. She went pale. I mean, in 2 days, the medication made some of her hair fall out. Like usually women are on top of how much hair they have, that comes out when they comb their hair. And she noticed that after just 2 days of using this stuff, it was, there was larger amounts of hair coming out when she would comb her hair. I mean, that's just 2 days. That stuff is ridiculously. It's like chemo. My mother, when she was dying of cancer, they gave her chemo. The same thing, $6,000 a shot, and it didn't do anything but make all of her hair fall out and kill her.
It is.
The cancer killed her, but the chemo didn't do really much for her. It just weakened her. It's a joke, and they know that they can cure this stuff. Like, look at the Italian guy. I think I'm sure you guys will know who I'm talking about. He's an Italian doctor, and he's shown the videos where people had sinus cancer, and they went up in the sinus cavity, and he does a treatment where he uses regular baking soda, because it's a natural antifungal, and there's proof and evidence to show that cancer is a fungus. And after these massive baking soda treatments and everything else, obviously it's sterilized water and everything, after a couple of days of this, he puts the camera back up the same guy's sinus cavity, and all the white polyps are gone. Wow. Like the first time there was tons of polyps, second time, and the FDA refuses to allow the research to get done here in the States. And of course, other government agencies block it and everything else. Any agency they can throw at people to block them, they try to block it. And I can tell you from my own personal experience watching my mother die, they would rather have made money off of her as much as they can than help her, because they're all about eugenics, but they're all about making money off of you as you're going into the ground. So not only do they kill you, but they ride you for everything you're worth. I mean, I some of her doctors I don't want to digress, get too much off on a tangent, but I had to argue with some of her doctors just to get her adequate care. And the way I got across to him was I told him, look, when she dies, I'm paying the bills. So do you really want to argue with me? Because I'll pay you $5 a month for the rest of your life, and I can get away with it. And, when you talk to these people where they understand in their pocketbook, that's when they pay attention to you, Steve. And it's the same thing with these major drug companies. They're not going to pay attention until their bottom line is affected.
Yeah, it's a real scam. It really is, and especially the situation here where, if we were diagnosing Lyme disease properly and treating it very successfully the way we could at a very early stage, it wouldn't be that hard to stop. But we're talking about the progression of this thing, and now we are looking back and we're trying to put it together. Jason, this is one of those things, that we have to look back at now and try to piece together. This is almost opposite of HIV, where it's been ignored, and we are seeing multi-symptoms. We are seeing various things. The movie, like I said, Under Our Skin is very good if you get a chance to watch that. It shows you how different people, some were on death's door. There were people who were passing out, and doctors were treating them with very aggressive antibiotics, which I don't like. Of course, we all don't like that. But it saved their lives, and these people were in court talking to the medical boards who were trying to yank the licenses of these doctors, and these people were healthy in court with their doctors saying, look, he saved my life with this stuff. You've got to expand what we're actually learning. And just like you said about the Italian cancer cure, I don't want to get too political, but I think it goes back to Anthony Fauci, obviously a Jesuit-trained director of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease. He and Robert Gallo, also a member of the Sword of Loyola. I mean, you're talking about the cup of Borgia for millions of people here.
Oh, of
Donald
course.
Rumsfeld.
It fits in, like it said, it fits into their, like with cancer and anything else, it fits into their eugenics ideas and their population control ideas. They're going to kill you, but they're going to ride you all the way to the grave, and they're going to rape you for every penny that they can.
Yeah. It's a reduction of population. We heard Ted Turner talking about this, but at the same time, it's like you said, they're robbing you while they're poisoning you.
Oh yeah, they're raping you. I mean, they're poisoning you, and as they're poisoning you, they're raping you and taking your wallet out of your back pocket at the same time. I mean, it's just, and they smile while they do it and talk to you the whole time and say, I do it because I love you. You know, they're like I've said this 100 times before. The New World Order is like an abusive husband. They beat the crap out of you, and as they're hitting you, woman, I only do this because I love you. I hit you, bam, shut up, don't. You know, they're like from one end to the other. They're slapping you. They're drunk. They're walking around the kitchen in their stained wife beater. You know, with bad, nasty beer breath. That's the way the New World Order is. And we're the abused wife that we just lay there and take it. Yes, oh, honey, oh, because we're afraid to do anything about it. And I don't mean not the group of us or other people that are awake, but as a whole, this country's citizens lack the balls that we had 200 years ago. I mean, plain and simple, we lack the cojones that we used to have. Because I could tell you what, we wouldn't have even had things get this far 230 years ago. It would have been settled like they settled it with Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. You know what I'm saying? That's how things got. And I'm not justifying violence, but 200 years ago they didn't mince words. You screwed up, duel. Let's go.
It's a bad situation. Well, we've been watching this with HIV/AIDS for a long time, and what I'll do is I'll mention my website, and Jason should mention his as well. My site is AIDSfraudvideo.com. Popeye, people want to look at our video. It shows you 10 reasons why HIV is not the cause of AIDS, what the real cause is.
Can they purchase your video on DVD, Steve?
Yeah, they can. If you go to the site, you can get it there, and I'll send out some extra information. Plus, you can watch it for free. So if you don't have the money, just watch it for free. That's okay. If you want to help us out, you can get a DVD there. Shipping's included.
You know what? Email the link around. If you can't afford to buy it, at least email the link to Steve's site so others can go and watch it for free as well. That way, you get the visitors, they get to see the information, and then who knows? Maybe they'll come back and they'll check out the other stuff that you've investigated.
Right on, man.
Jason, what about your site? You have a website?
Yeah, it's fauxcapitalist.com, F-A-U-X capitalist.com. And that's where I cover a lot of economic, financial, and political issues with coverage that you're not going to find on most websites. I expose the Rothschild gold standard, which it's commonly regarded that we need to go back to a gold standard, but actually that's what the Rothschilds favored themselves with the Bank of England. And a lot of political issues as well. I haven't had my website hacked by the IDF yet. I guess with my article that I wrote in Netanyahu's speech and on one of the shills for...
Oh, don't worry. You've been on my radio show, so...
It might happen now.
Now you'll be in their sites. Thanks for coming on, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm going to have you on again soon.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for listening. Down the rabbit hole. I'll be back Sunday.